folks, welcome to another edition in Real Estate Experts. I'm here today with Christine Rudolf from the Inner City Brisbane area, and like always I'm going to grill her with all the questions that you've been putting to me. So I just want to thank another one of our esteemed experts for joining us for 20 minutes or so. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Glenn.
Much appreciated. Now, I know that we haven't put too much thought into what we're going to be discussing, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what sellers are asking of their agents in the current market and what they can do to get, I suppose, to get the highest price for their properties that they're looking at selling. Various matters, all real estate, and I always go to experts like yourself in order to have those questions on behalf of the public who may not know what you know and what other people associated with real estate know. So that's, I suppose, the purpose, and our audience certainly know that. So what is it? First thing I often like to find out is just so our audience can find out a little bit about who they're dealing with and who we're grilling for information. We always like, or often like, to get a short back and sides about what brought you to real estate. So what was it that brought, on behalf of our audience there, what brought you to real estate and what led you to us?
Thanks, Glenn. Well, I guess a little bit like the sellers, I've been in the position as well. I started buying property when I was in my early 20s with a view to holding on to a property portfolio. But sometimes life doesn't always work out the way we expect. And I very unexpectedly found myself in a situation around about 10 years ago with quite a large property portfolio that I've worked very hard to acquire through buying and renovating and value adding, with having to sell. And, you know, I guess in that situation, it was a real shock to me because it was the first time that I'd ever really experienced the whole, selling a property. And I went to an agent, trusted the agent, thought that everything that the agent was telling me was true, and ended up having a very horrific and expensive lesson where I lost a lot of money in unnecessary marketing costs, had been told that I was going to earn about $100,000 more on my sales than what I ended up getting. And the whole experience to me was so eye-opening that I actually made a commitment at that stage, having worked in a very professional background. I worked in the media for a long time, and then I worked for a major international airline in training and development. I actually made a commitment that one day I would go into real estate so that I could help other people avoid the mistakes that I went through myself as a seller. So that's really why I'm here today in this hot seat with you.
It's kind of interesting that when a lot of people go to the REOQ and they get their registration, and it's because they've seen the activities of a real estate agent and they think, and in some cases they're very, very right about this, that they could do it better. And it's interesting that your pain is your future client's pleasure, because by you not doing what hurt you monetarily is the very thing that you'll avoid at all costs on behalf of your sellers. So excellent. Yeah. And because I understand, well, you mentioned just then actually that you had a job, a professional job in the media before real estate. Has that been beneficial in the reason you're getting such great results for your clients now, while really you're surrounded in a very unique market by some agents that aren't doing that? Is your background any part of that?
Yes, I think, I'm naturally a born communicator, and research, analysis, communication, reporting has always been very important to me. I actually am a trained journalist originally, and I just found when I was selling a property that the one thing that really lacked when I was dealing with an agent was that regular communication. And it absolutely astonishes me the number of people who come to me and say, can I have a little bit of advice about selling my property? They actually just don't hear from their agent. They'll have an open house at the weekend. They won't have any calls from the agent. They have to chase the agent a week later and say, what happened? And that really surprises me, because there are actually people out there wanting to sell, they need to sell, and they go to an agent because, we don't sell our house every day of the week. This is probably a one-off transaction for most people. And why do you engage an agent? Because you want a professional, you want advice, and you want guidance. So communication has been critical to helping people make the decision about selling their home. So that sort of reporting is very, very important, and I do find that very, very, very beneficial to clients.
It's interesting you mention what some of the agents are and aren't doing, because if we've got when we think of any other business other than real estate, we go to a butcher, and if they don't have the best meat or the meat that's at the standard we like, we go to another butcher the next week or another butcher the week after until we find one that does the job for us. But what you just mentioned then is really true, in that we only choose a real estate agent once every 5 to 7 years, possibly only once ever. So we don't have the benefit of knowing, with the benefit of hindsight, how good or not good an agent was. What sort of things can we look for now? And this really is a long way of me asking this question, but it's certainly pertinent, I think, because again, many of the people watching and listening to this interview are in this boat. They've only got what's being presented to them at any one time to go on to choose their agent. They don't have the benefit of, last time I bought their meat from the butcher, it was no good. What sort of criteria, because we're seeing properties at the moment, some are staying on the market in your area now, and in other areas across the country. Some properties are selling quickly, within days, weeks, months, maybe a month or something. Under 30 days in some cases, and some properties are staying on the market for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, even years on end. So really my long-winded way of saying this is, what's the difference, and what criteria should someone be looking for in an agent of someone who's going to get the job done within 30 to 60 days and one that's going to sit on the market for 9 months? And so many people must ask you that question.
Yeah, it's a very good point. To put myself back in the shoes of a seller, and this is what I find so many sellers say to me, and this is what I was guilty of myself. When I went to sell my properties 10 years ago, and they were beautiful properties, and it wasn't just in one city either. I had properties in Sydney and properties in a beautiful beach area of New South Wales. And my assumption as a seller was that the agent with the most marketing in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Wentworth Courier, as well as the agent with the most ads in the paper at the weekend, and the agent who told me the highest price that I was going to get for my property. In my naivety back then, trusting those agents, I thought, yeah, they must be the best agent. They're the one with the most ads, and they're the ones that have quoted me the highest price. It was a very expensive lesson to learn, because the agent who quoted me the highest price and who I gave the most money to, in all instances there, and I didn't use the same agent, were not the agents that sold my property. And the same formula applies now, because that was sort of going into the 90s when we had a difficult real estate market, very similar to the one that we have now.
Yes.
The key skills at the moment, when there are double the number of properties on the market to when they were at the boom, and they are taking longer to sell, is looking for an agent who will give your property a point of difference. Now, it's not necessarily the biggest ad and the most prominent agent. It is an agent who is actually skillful. It comes down to the key elements of positioning the property differently. And that does come down to things like the presentation of the property, which I can elaborate more on, the way that property is promoted. Now, there are key ways to promote a property that are not just the standard things that most people assume. The price of the property is very, very important, and that does come down to skill of an agent. And finally, the thing that I think is the most important skill in the current market is actually good salesmanship, because there are buyers out there every Saturday, as you found in your research, which I really would love us to elaborate on, that actually want to buy a property. They will go into an open house and they will want to buy a property. Now, the proof is that in a flat market or a challenging market that we're in at the moment, the last 2 properties that I have sold, I've actually had competing offers on them. Now, there is a skill to doing that, and that's actually creating a sense of excitement about a property, creating competition, having a lot of people come to your opens, which I've been getting. I've been getting 30 people through my opens at a weekend. And there's a skill to doing that. A lot of people say there's no buyers around, there's no buyers around. There are plenty of buyers out there. And not only are there plenty of buyers out there, there are buyers who actually do want to buy. And there is a skill in getting those buyers to buy. And that skill, if I can just sort of elaborate on it a little bit, is that buyers are a little bit nervous at the moment, and they get very confused because there is so much choice on the market. And you sort of hear them say, oh, well, you know, what if the market goes down further? And what if? The key to a sale in the current market is to find that buyer, to nurture that buyer, and to give that buyer the confidence to buy. And that comes down to something very important, which I know you've found, and that's follow-up.
Yeah. Well, certainly you mentioned that that research we did, and we went in as consumers, just to let you folk know, and some of you guys would have heard this story, you know, we went in, we went as consumers, we went as buyers, testing, primarily we were testing follow-up, and 3/4 of the agents didn't make one piece of follow-up. So given that not everyone across, you know, certainly our viewers extend in Brisbane, but across Queensland and even throughout the rest of the country, not everyone can have Christine Rudolf and your team representing your properties getting 30 buyers through. So what are some of the key indicators that will flag to our audience agents like you? Because, you know, there's agents across the country that are doing well, and yet the problem is 3/4 of them aren't doing well, and yet at that listing presentation or at that appraisal, they can all talk just like they did for you 10 years ago. They all tell you the things that you trust are true, and yet 3/4 of them aren't telling you the truth, because at least in our research, that was 150 visits to open homes. There was no follow-up whatsoever. So are there any key indicators that can tell when they're dealing with a Christine Rudolf or when they're dealing with one of the 75% of them that aren't going to do anything?
Well, again, if I can be like a seller who's listening to this, you know, if I was to go back today and to put my property on the market just as I did 10 years ago, or properties, you know, the most important thing that I would be doing at the moment is that I would be gathering as much information as possible about the real estate agents in your area, or who specialise in selling your type of property. Now, the thing is that just as you've done, Glenn, I would be going out like a seller, and I would actually be secret shopping that particular agent. I would be sending them emails off realestate.com, see if they reply to those emails.
Okay, and how quickly?
And how quickly.
What would be a gun agent's response time? Like, for example, if I emailed you off realestate.com, what sort of turnaround could I expect out of you?
Well, really,
putting you on the spot here?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a very good question. I mean, these days, thanks to the beauty of iPhones, most of us have got our phones, or most agents should have their phones connected to the internet. You know, recently I actually went overseas and managed to do a deal while overseas for a week, from getting a buyer inquiry overseas and being able to, you know, get that person through the property and do the deal while I was away.
Okay, so that's indicative of your team. So you've got a team.
I've got a team. I was able to contact my offsider back here, and she took them through the property, and away we went from there. So speed is the great impressor. If there is a hot buyer out there that wants to buy, they're serious about making that inquiry. You know, they're not just out there because they're you know, tire kicking at the moment. They're really serious because they're thinking about buying. So the great impressor is to actually have that inquiry responded to, I would say, by the close of business. If you get that in at the beginning of the day, you know, someone in your team should really be responding to that buyer by the end of the day at least. You know, myself, I do like to get onto it straight away, but you know, everyone's different. But you know, speed is the great impressor. Follow up straight away. Organise an appointment.
What about on you just mentioned that we should be secret shopping our agents that we're considering. On the day of an open house, pretending we're a buyer, we go in, we're actually looking at the agent, but the agent doesn't know the difference between us and a buyer, like the exercise we did. What should we expect from a gun agent? Because I know what to expect from 75%, which was no follow-up.
Exactly.
At least in the 150, we might have just picked 150 that were, you know, I think it's a pretty sizable sample size, but what would we get if I came through one of your open homes? What would we have got from you?
Well, you know, what we like to do for all of our buyers is, you know, when they come in, they're greeted. You know, there is an assistant There's a team that actually operates in our open houses, which is wonderful. We have a registration book at the front where we take a buyer's name, their phone number, and an email. And people are really happy to do that because they're there because they're interested in property. They wouldn't be coming through otherwise.
Yeah, so that's right. Yep.
And as we're leaving that open house to go to the next open, we get an automatic thank you to our buyer via an SMS just to say thank you so much for coming in. We're going to be giving you a buzz later today to get some feedback for our seller just to see what you thought of the property.
Okay, so by the time they've left, they get, at some stage in the time after, they just get a thank you SMS.
That's right.
And then they get a phone call by the end of the day.
Then they get a phone call by the end of the day.
I must say that would be atypical, at least according to the research we did. So when I say atypical, that's not what you would normally expect out of most agents, I would suggest. So
well, it does sort of shock us because a lot of the buyers actually saying, I can't believe that you're actually following us up. Following us up. We've been to so many other properties and no one's ever followed us up. And what shocked me recently is that a seller came to me out of frustration of having been with another agent for 3 months, and this is what you spoke about before. I'd sold a property in the area. They'd actually come through one of my open houses and I had followed them up. And they came back and they said, look, thank you very much for following us up, and we've noticed that you have sold that property. Can you come and have a look at ours because we're just not getting any feedback, and we want to know, have we priced it right? Is there anything we can do differently to the presentation of our property? And I said, sure, I'll come and have a look at it. I'll just come and have a look at it for free. It's with another agent. I'll give you some tips. If that will help your agent do something differently for you, well, I'm happy for you that you've sold. So I went in, had a look, gave them a lot of tips on what to do, and they were very impressed, and they actually asked me to handle the sale of their property. So I came in and, I couldn't believe it, Glenn. After that property being on the market for 3 months with another agent, I actually, on the first weekend, with changing things around a little bit, which we'll talk about in a minute about presentation, had 30 groups through that property, and out of those 30 groups, there were actually 5 people who had been through that property 3 times before with another agent. They'd never been followed up. Within 2 weeks, that property was under contract with competing parties, and it was sold to someone who tried to buy that property from the other agent who'd never been followed up, and they actually paid $40,000 more than what the other agent had told them that property was worth. So I mean that shocks me that people are ripping up tens of thousands of dollars because they're not being serviced properly.
Yeah, I used to be shocked by that sort of thing, but unfortunately, that. Hopefully, I still want to give the benefit of the doubt and say that's probably an isolated incident. But my opinion and yours, if we just take out of that, as shocked as we might be, I guess the advice for the listeners is find an agent that is just behaving in a manner that you would want your property represented by. Now, that actually does bring me back to your expertise that is really indicative of yourself and the way you present properties. So presentation. So we've got sort of price. You've mentioned promotion and how we expose that. So we want to get those right, and you can discuss that with your agent when they get there. This presentation thing that is your expertise, how can they present their properties better? What's your take on presentation?
Well, it's very interesting because study has shown that, and I don't know where, I can't quote where this is from, but it is proven that that 80% of people are visual people. Only 20% of people can actually go into a property and see beyond the clutter and see the potential in a property. So 80% of people who go into the property cannot see past, the filthy carpets or, the paint on the wall. They actually see that as costing them a lot of money. So it's very, very interesting. A lot of my sellers just don't realise how a few simple little tricks that don't cost them a lot of money can actually make them tens of thousands of dollars. And as part of the service that we offer in my team, I actually do have a qualified interior designer who does come along, have a look at the property and give a complimentary report to my sellers, which I'm happy to give to anyone if you'd like it, just on little things that you can do that are going to add tens of thousands of dollars to your home and to make it stand out above the competition. Now, the classic example is, I keep drawing back onto it, but it's this property that recently I've just sold that had been on the market for 3 months with another agent. These lovely sellers came to me and they said, look, we're not here to muck around, we actually do want to sell. What can we do? And I went in and I said, well, would you be open to a little bit of feedback on some things that, the buyers might look at this and they might be a little bit scared, and we can do something about it. I've got a great handyman. He can come in, he can give you a quote. Whether or not you want to go ahead with it is up to you. So they just painted the roof, they did some regrouting in the bathroom, they just tidied things up a little bit, clipped the hedges in the garden, and they put some lovely cushions on the lounge and some throws and a few different things. And we photographed it professionally. I think it cost $200 for professional photographs. That went from being something that people just, bypassed on realestate.com and the internet and other places to, wow,
stopping them in
I
their
can
tracks.
see myself living here.
Yeah.
And it has been proven with psychology of selling, as I know you're a big person about psychology of selling, that people who are emotionally engaged with property, and I know you've been like this too, with recently buying your own place on the coast.
We fall in love with it, don't we? Yeah. I'm the biggest sucker as anyone. I fell in love with that thing, and I tell you, well, it's funny. You're right. We get vulnerable when we fall in love with a property, and that's absolutely the case. And I definitely did. I was, when I said to that agent, I don't think I've told this story to any of the folks, but. When I said to that agent, there's a lot on the market, here's my offer, and it was a lower offer because I'm buying, it's that agent's responsibility to get the high price for their seller, it's not my responsibility. So when I said that, what I was really saying is, I love this property enough to raise my children here. And boy, oh boy, am I emotionally vulnerable in that position. And look, unfortunately for that last seller, that agent didn't take advantage of that emotional vulnerability where I was deciding. I wasn't there to muck around. I was there to buy that property, and I did, and very well, if I do say so. So I wouldn't want to, I've got to say, I wouldn't want to buy through the Christine Rudolf team. I would want to sell through her every single day.
Well, it's really funny that you say that, because the buyers of this property, they were absolutely gorgeous. And, the husband, as he was sitting there shaking his head, upping his offer to keep his wife happy, happy wife, happy life.
Yes.
He said, I've just bought my wife the most expensive bathroom in the inner city of Brisbane, because she walked in and she just fell in love with the way the bathroom had been done.
And that was one of the things you suggested.
That's right. We just said, let's do a little bit of this and a little bit of that to the bathroom. I think, it cost them $200 just to do a few little tricks here and there. And, she said, I just can see myself sitting there on a Saturday afternoon, having a beautiful bubble bath with a glass of champagne, relaxing after a long week at work. And that was buying with emotion, which then comes down to another skill in the market, which is good salesmanship.
Definitely. Well, and those presentation type tips, I understand that you've had this repackaged since you gave me mine. Are those sorts of guides encapsulated in that product? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And how about the book that you were putting the finishing touches
Yes,
to? Is that ready, or is that?
It's just in the throes of being finalised at the moment.
And that's
published.
on those subjects,
Yes.
on staging, on getting a property ready for sale, all these sorts of tips.
Absolutely.
You've put it in a book. Excellent.
Yes,
Excellent.
and that obviously, it is a passion of mine to be in this industry. I'm in it because I'm really passionate about helping people get a better price for their properties. From personal experience, it's something that I really do want to help other people. And so, that book, it does. It is going to be launched in bookstores, and it will be marketed for $49.95 a copy.
Okay.
Obviously it takes a lot to write and publish and everything, but to anyone who really is interested in that, it will be offered to my clients or anyone for free, you know, just to help you have the advice of what you can do to sell.
So if we can, I'll get the little number put up there. If they can SMS you maybe or something, I'll get the number put up on the screen right here. And we'll get that so that they SMS you maybe with book offer or something, and you can get them a copy. Excellent. Well, we'll put that up on the screen. So, perfect. All right. Well, folks, I've been hanging out with Christine Rudolf. I trust that's been helpful for you. Summarising some of those things: choose your agent wisely, and if you can. Well, again, what I would say is giving Christine a free plug. I would suggest that if you're marketing a property anywhere in her area, and I know that's a tiny segment of my audience, but certainly put her on your shopping list. Otherwise, take her advice in looking at the criteria that we've discussed here today when choosing your agent. So, Christine, thanks for hanging out with me.
Thank you so much, Glenn. And I just do want to say as well, if anyone does want any help at all in choosing their agent, it doesn't matter what area you're in. You know, you're very, very welcome to contact me, and I can help you with the criteria of how to choose your agent and how to go about it.
Excellent. It's very generous of you, because I know how busy you are looking after your sellers, so it's very nice of you to help out our folks listening. So, folks, until next time, I'm Glenn Twiddle. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Glenn.